G'day and welcome to episode 16 of Let's Get Fiscal, the official podcast of the Australian Employment Party. My name is Ian Dooley and welcoming back this week Tim Jones. How you going, Tim?
Always a pleasure, always a pleasure.
And you were sorely missed last episode. I tried to do a bit of a rant myself, but people missed you.
Well, it's not easy. I mean, I think that, look, we do a Laurel and Hardy thing. I've taken my computer along to Golgong this week. I'm out on my motorbike again on one of my road trips. Hashtag road trip, you'll find me there. And grandson, I was on the shovel all day, so I'm pretty exhausted. But the good thing is that I'm only going to be part of this for about 10 minutes or something because you've got a terrific interview to follow.
We have a special guest, and we're really honoured to have Scott Santens, who is a big campaigner, very popular author and speaker about basic income. And he was great enough to come along and talk about basic income versus the job guarantee with me earlier in the week, and we're going to cut to that a little bit later. Before we get started with everything, I'll just do the normal housekeeping. I want to let everyone know where we can be found and how they can get involved. Log on to AustralianEmploymentParty.org to find out all about us. If you tweet at Ian Dooley, that's IAINDOOLEY for me, or at FourthLeft2 for Tim. Use the hashtag OzMMT, that's OZMMT, if you want something to get our attention. And you can also search Australian Employment Party on Facebook, as well as subscribing to this YouTube channel or the podcast on iTunes. I also just want to give a little plug for the petition I've got going to move from sound finance to functional finance, which we're going to talk a little bit about.
Yes, we will.
We've got 424 supporters as of the time of recording, which is fantastic. I want to get to 100,000, so let's see let's see where the tipping point is there.
I think persistence is going to be one of our themes for quite some time yet.
We were going to wrap up quickly what's happened. The biggest news in this week, government-wise, it was Australian government-wise, was this. It's
the latest make-believe Treasurer Scott Morrison.
Oh my God! This
relabeling lifters and leaners as taxed and taxed not. I mean, everybody thought that he was talking about all those big foreign companies that aren't paying tax. No. He's complaining that the people who can't afford to pay tax aren't paying tax.
I know.
Great.
I was gobsmacked. I could not believe that I was hearing it.
Oh, it's chutzpah. It's incredible.
And so One thing I see a lot of in response to this kind of thing is, the 1% are manipulating to control the 99%, and Scott Morrison is complicit in that. I don't think that he is genuinely kind of like up to something. I don't think this is some devious conspiracy or a devious deception.
Can I throw up the useful phrase, the useful idiot? Now that's had quite a bit of currency lately, and honestly, the guy that you meet at the door of the nightclub doesn't run the nightclub.
Right.
He doesn't. He's just a thug. Or excuse me about people who are standing on the doors of nightclubs. But I see all these people as being put up to it. And Scott Morrison is you look at him, he's I haven't heard anything that I really admire from the man.
Yeah. I did actually go to university with two guys that worked the door at a nightclub. Both of whom were studying engineering.
Yeah, so, that was a faux pas on my part. But yeah, no, and honestly, the press is not listening to him. He sounds just like Joe Hockey, who was probably the worst treasurer after John Howard, and it just goes on and on. That's what they say. They say is the Libs are just chasing their tail, and then Malcolm Turnbull insists that he's got a mandate. But if somebody sneezes in his party, then they have it. They haven't got a majority, and it's hilarious to watch. I mean, I really do enjoy Schadenfreude in some circumstances, and this is when I really get going. I think this is fantastic. I just had a big bowl of popcorn. Actually, it's fantastic.
So yeah, I think that what we're seeing is not really a grand deception on behalf of the people who are, we've got genuine economists. We're constantly seeing Stephen Kuklus. Stephen Kuklus isn't lying, right?
No.
He's not deceiving anyone.
No.
He just is from this school of economics that does not have the correct view of things.
No.
And it just so happens that the mainstream of economics right now is not correct. It's ascribed, so it's got this whole this thing called sound finance, which is the government has to have dollar in, dollar out, like accountability. If you want to spend some money, you got to tax some money. And, this petition that I'm running now is that we want to move from sound finance at the government level, the federal government level, to functional finance, which is a much nicer term when you think about it.
Yeah, well, and they're streets apart, aren't they?
Yeah, so functional finance basically says that the finance of the government should be functioning to enable the goals of the community. That people want to save some money and they want to spend some money and they want to do some work and they want to get things done and then spend some time with their kids and then go to the beach.
But apparently the government, like especially a Liberal government and, any neoliberal, they just think that basically citizens' reason to exist is to just survive, just live in terror, to
pay taxes.
To pay taxes, to have the monkey on their back,
Right.
and this is why I've been interested in this, because we are talking about a complete turnaround in the way a country thinks about itself.
Yeah, it's about moving from, I guess I don't know if we could call modern monetary theory or functional finance ideology, but certainly what's happening now in mainstream economics is ideological. I think it's ideologically driven.
I think so. I think they think the sun goes around the earth, and this is when you talk about Stephen Kuklus. The sun still rises for him, and it sets. Right, it's not the earth spinning.
Yeah.
So that taxes don't pay for things. Now we're going to have to go to that video soon. Of course, I have to remind you.
Yeah. So it's what we've got to keep chipping away at is the mainstream orthodoxy of economics. But we have to try and maintain this real factual line, because it's so easy to be tarred with the conspiracy brush because there's so much craziness going on in economic discussion. People talking about conspiracy this and Rothschilds with the central bank ownership, and you can look like that.
Yeah,
you can basically look like Malcolm Roberts if you come out and say, hey, the government doesn't need to borrow in order to spend. It's really easy to look at that and go, oh, right, tinfoil hat guy.
Well, it is, and people pick up on these small things that honestly I've fallen down a number of times over the years because I've used very strong language. Emotive language, and I think that my spleen is nearly bled dry now. Or it's I've got enough for day to day now, thankfully, and I'm happy not to call ScoMo scummo for the purpose of this video. And honestly, you do get a bigger audience if you're not doing that. So
I know. I caused a bit of controversy by putting scummo in the
sorry to bring that up. Yeah,
YouTube videos this week, but I do like it. You got to understand that to me, scummo is so much more tame than how I really feel. So,
yes, I think there are many viewers who could share our feelings without actually enunciating them. Okay.
But I would like to pay homage just now, or give a nod to the economists out there that are really helping us, both directly and indirectly by going against the mainstream orthodoxy. Because when you think about it, mainstream media, the journalists, it's not their job to be economists. They just speak to experts, right?
No.
And so if there's a tide of economists saying the same thing, journalists can't be expected to just say, well, what, I'm a journalist, but you're wrong.
Where's the money coming from? All this sort of thing.
We need these economists. And I just want to say that I'm really, really impressed by the work of Richard Dennis. He came out strong against Scott Morrison this week. Ross Gittins has been chipping away at it for years, like a decade. Maybe more.
He's a real communitarian, Ross Gittins.
Yeah, and his work's really good. He's off the mark in some things, but at least he's on our side, right?
I think so.
And Steve Keen, if you haven't caught his interview that he did with Lise Morgan on the ABC, is absolutely fantastic. Really puts to bed the whole government debt discussion and defends himself admirably against the continued taunts of the fact that he was wrong about the recession with the financial crisis. But, I just wanted to say thanks publicly to all of those economists that are helping us chip away at this destructive orthodoxy.
Well, I think that what we're trying to do is usher in a new era, and it's not sci-fi. It's not ridiculous. It's just about making a country into a community and a government all about the community, isn't it?
Right. It's about making the economy functional rather than balanced. Like like we have to balance the books. No, we don't have to do that. It's about what the community needs and what the community wants, and that's what we're after. So with that said, I think that's a good point to transition over to this talk I had with Scott Santens, and I'm going to do a little bit of an intro to Scott in a moment. But thanks very much again, Tim, for joining me, and I'll see you again next week.
Always good, and hello to my Twitter followers. Love yous all.
All right, I'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Our very special guest today, Scott Santens, is a writer and advocate of basic income for all. He's a citizen of Earth and New Orleans, a Bachelor of Science in Psychology, and moderator of the basic income community on Reddit. He's also the founder of the Big Patreon Creator Pledge. You can find out more about Scott by following him at Scott Santens, that's SCOTTSANTENS on Twitter, or just go to his website of the same.com and find out all about him and start learning about basic income. Scott, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And so we're going to kick it off with your presentation of the universal basic income in 60 seconds.
Sure. Okay. So I advocate the idea of a fully universal basic income, which importantly is to every individual, and it's a sufficient amount of money to cover basic needs. So essentially, it ends poverty, and is given without any conditions whatsoever, so that it's something that you earn in addition to work and in spite of any lack of work as well. So that it's essentially a income floor for everybody that they can use to build incomes on top of.
Okay, well that was really quick. That was only 24 seconds or something. Okay, cool. So I'll now ask questions, and then we can switch over, and I'll do the job guarantee after that. So the first question I have is why you feel as though it's necessary to give, for example, an individual earning $100,000 the same amount that you would give to someone who is earning $0.
Oh, sure. So I think that this is kind of a misunderstanding in how it works, because you can't really look at a UBI outside of the tax system that it's inside of. So yes, like if you were to compare now and in a after UBI, like if you're looking at someone who is earning, say, $100,000, let's say their taxes right now are, let's say, $30,000, and then we enact basic income, and then they're receiving $12,000, but they're also being taxed more than, say, $42,000. So depending on the numbers and depending on how we fund the basic income, then of course we're going to be clawing back whatever we give through the tax system. So it's almost like it's actually can be very identical to a negative income tax. It's just a negative income tax is a way of providing everyone a basic income guarantee, but what you're doing is you're clawing back from the actual amount you're giving based on the income. Whereas a UBI is saying, okay, everyone gets the same amount, but then we claw back differences through the income tax system, but also through the tax system as a whole. So that let's say if you institute a land value tax or a financial transaction tax or a value added tax. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that we could claw back incomes at the top, so that essentially those who earn more than a certain amount are essentially paying for their basic incomes and those of others. It's just there still is a net transfer amount from the top to the bottom. It's not just everybody's getting the same amount, or else that's equivalent to printing all sorts of new money and then giving it to everybody.
Okay, so How then is this different or advantageous from a normal targeted Social Security program?
Yeah, I think a good way to make this comparison really is to look at, again, like this negative income tax, because that's what people are kind of familiar with. That's what Milton Friedman talked about. This is, and it's also people are like, oh, well, why should we give money, to people who don't need it or whatever? But the thing is that we are existing in a world now where employment is more and more precarious. Like, you can say that technological unemployment is only about, say, being employed or not being employed, but there's actually a great deal of atomization involved, so that essentially we're taskifying the way that we work, so that there's so much more part-time labor and a growing amount of gig labor and contract labor. The 1099 economy, this self-employment kind of world that we're entering into. And because of that, incomes vary a lot more than they used to back in the day when someone had a full-time job for 30 years and it never really changed. But nowadays, people are kind of patching together their incomes across a wide variety of means. And so it makes it increasingly difficult to create these kind of safety net systems for this new world that we're in. Like, we're really missing a great deal of flexibility that I feel that we need to make these work more. Like, just for example, just imagine like an Uber driver now. So there's a lot of Uber drivers who are essentially, maybe they have a main job, but they're just trying to earn a little extra money on the side, in which case they're earning extra income on the side because they essentially have to. Maybe they don't really want to. But with a basic income, then you actually can do all these other jobs because you can, it works for you. There's so much more flexibility involved. I mean, people do actually like to choose how they work. So on the one hand, being an Uber driver is great because if you want to earn a little bit of extra money there, you can do that, and that's a new way to do that. And then, of course, you can do like TaskRabbit, or you can get like a contract job somewhere or whatever. But you can actually you can make this kind of new system of work for us better by having a solid floor underneath everybody, no matter what. So that's what I think it's important to look at UBI as like a 21st century kind of system.
Okay, but fundamentally, if you're giving money to someone and then taxing it back from other people, then it's not. It deviates from the original purist vision of a universal basic income, which is unconditional, given to everyone, and with no means testing, so that it's not, there's that whole stigma argument, and then there's the argument of it being less complex to administer. Those aren't arguments in favor of a universal basic income if you're then taxing back higher income earners, since it's still a form of means testing. Is that right?
Oh, no. It's because it's more like a refundable universal tax credit. So it's like it's just like right now we are already giving tax credits to people who essentially don't need it. I mean, why are we giving someone a home mortgage interest rate deduction, or
absolutely,
this subsidy or this tax credit?
I agree that we need to reform taxation and reform Social Security. But the notion, like the actual definition of a universal basic income, is that it's universal and it's basic. So as soon as you remove the universality of it, whether you're doing that through tax reform or whether you're doing that by means testing Social Security payments, those are two sides of the same coin. Essentially, it's not universal.
No, it's universal because everybody still gets it. It's like that's the floor that you get. You're only touching the income that people earn besides that. So everybody gets, say, $1,000 per month. But then if you're earning, say, $1 million a month, then you're just taxed from that earning. So you're not taxing like the actual $1,000 a month. That's what you get no matter what.
Right. But you said before, if someone was currently earning $100,000 and they were paying $30,000 in tax, and then you gave a $12,000 basic income, then they would be taxed more than $42,000.
Right.
So that's just taxing back the money that you're giving them.
You are, but you aren't. I know it's confusing because it's you're not touching the actual income. A lot of this is a perception kind of thing. So everybody has that income floor. It's just when you earn above it, that's the amount that it comes out of. So again, if you're earning $1 million or whatever, in order to enact a basic income, we aren't just giving them more money. It's shifting away, shifting around of the way that we do things, because it really is so much more efficient to do it that way.
Okay, so when you say efficiency, are you talking about the cost of administration?
Yeah, I'm saying that if you look at like all the programs that we do, like, so not only welfare, but all these different tax credits and subsidies and deductions and all that we're doing from both for individuals and corporations, like there's so many, like hundreds of different programs. And so there's an efficiency there where if you combine all of those things together into essentially one cash payment, then you can actually simplify all that to a great degree. And I consider that to be a great increase in efficiency, instead of having all these other various programs that are overlapping and interacting with each other and whatnot.
Okay, so just finally, because we're in the last minute here of the UBI section, so I just want to get this figure from you, $12,000. In Australia, that's below what you need to pay rent. It's about half of what you need to pay rent. So it doesn't take care of basic needs in Australia. It would need to be about 30,000, I think, if someone was able to live out of poverty and not work. Is that what you're looking for? You're looking for people to be able to not work and live on the universal basic income?
No, I believe that country by country defines poverty in their own way, and whatever you need to cover your most basic needs is, of course, a somewhat arbitrary definition. I use $12,000 in the U.S. because that's the way that we have defined as our federal poverty guidelines, and we've devised our programs around that number. So in Australia, I don't know what the federal poverty guideline is, or if you've actually defined that yourselves and how you what number you organize around there, around your systems around there. But whatever that is, I think is a good starting point, because it is about just making sure that you cover basic needs without conditions. And as far as like allowing people to not work, I think that's actually a very important aspect to it, because if you look at things like the minimum wage, the reason that people accept so little money is because they have no choice but to accept that money. So if you give someone the ability to say no to work, then you actually don't need these things like minimum wage laws in order for this to function. Because then if, say, you are receiving a basic income and you have the option to say, well, I don't want to work for you for $5 an hour, but I'd be happy to do that for $15 an hour. And you don't even need a minimum wage, to do that. You just say, hey, pay me enough in order for me to do that work, and I'll do it. That's something that is only introduced through this unconditionality of a basic income. And I think that when you look at that and also look at the experiments where you see people actually work more, that it's really important for people to have at least some money to actually do what they want to do, to pursue what they want to pursue. It's kind of like you have to have money to make money. And this is what we kind of see, is that by providing everyone at least something, then they can use that, and actually people can work more. And especially when it comes to like self-employment and even forms of work like voluntary work and open source economy work, this kind of thing.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Scott. That's a great presentation of the universal basic income, and it's good to have you on the show. I'll now do a 1-minute introduction on what a job guarantee is, and then there'll be 9 minutes left in the program for you to ask your questions about a job guarantee.
Okay.
So I'll start the clock now. So the primary function, as seen by those in the heterodox school of macroeconomics following in the traditions of functional finance, is that the government should close the spending gap somehow. And the spending gap is the difference between how much people want to spend and how much people want to save. The way that the government does that is up to the government, it's up to the people how they organise it, but one of the best ways it can do it is to ensure full employment. A job guarantee is an open-ended, federally funded and locally administered program where the actual jobs themselves are proposed by the community and, in some cases, the unemployed people. It pays a socially inclusive minimum wage, which is defined as something that's more than just being able to eat and pay rent, and it is counter-cyclical in that the expansion of the program occurs when there's a private sector downturn, and as the private sector hires out of that labour pool, it will shrink again. So there we go. I think that was exactly 60 seconds. So what questions do you have about a job guarantee?
Yeah. So I'm curious. how would you frame or what do you think of a job guarantee in relation to like David Graeber's idea of quote unquote bullshit jobs? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I've heard him talk about bullshit jobs. So there's two things to say about bullshit jobs. One is that a lot of private sector jobs are already bullshit jobs, even at the upper end of the pay spectrum. So I don't think that we can eliminate wasted effort. There is always going to be an element of experimentation, and some jobs you don't think they're going to be bullshit when you start out, but then they turn out to be bullshit. So I think that's unavoidable. Everything, especially. Yeah, I'm a small business owner, and I know a lot of other small business owners, and a lot of small business ventures turn out to be a complete waste of time. Were they a bullshit job? No, it was an experiment. So I think that there's always going to be an element of jobs that are wasted effort, and we chalk that up to experience and learn as we go. The other end of the spectrum, which is bullshit jobs like busy work, basically decreasing our productivity in order to maintain full employment. The notion that a job guarantee relies on that is predicated on the fact that we assume there is no private purpose, or that there is no scope for work beyond the immediate automation horizon. So what I mean by that is that we assume that because, for example, Uber's going to introduce self-driving cars, that there's nothing else for those Uber drivers, nothing else that they could possibly be doing, which I find to be a very narrow-minded or short-sighted notion. For example, and I think that really importantly, with a job guarantee, because it's the biggest thing, this bullshit jobs thing. It's like everyone's like, it's going to be busy work, and it's like a misery mill. It'll be like cracking rocks in jail. I went down and sat down with a guy at my local cafe the other day, and I want to organize a community event there to discuss this, because I really want to hyper-localize the types of ideas that we would have about what we could do for that money, or what we could do for work as if they were federally funded. And one of the things that he's trying to get going is a community garden. And he needs some materials, but he also needs just a bunch of people to come and hammer things together and dig up the compost and help come and garden and do the weeding and then pick the vegetables and all that kind of stuff. Now that's a perfectly valid job guarantee program. And it's one example, right? I mean, there's a million examples, but it's going to differ by different communities. But if you went and really spoke to people around you about what could be improved or what could be done, I'm sure you'd be able to come up with a very long list of potential work.
Sure, and that also brings me to my next question too, is because a job guarantee is not about an income guarantee, but about, say, tasks, then how what is your version of, say, a job guarantee where, like, how do you set how much people earn, and is there a selection between, say, 10 hours a week or 20 hours a week or 30 hours a week or 40 hours a week, and is this, say, how do you determine what job pays and what another job pays, and is this, because this obviously isn't something that's set by the market. This isn't like the market saying, this is a $25,000 job, and we'll accept this. Yeah, I'll take this. This is saying that this job needs to be done, and so let's set it at, say, I don't know, like you said in Australia for poverty, like $30,000, and that's that. And so, is there a varying across jobs, and who determines that? What I'm really interested in is how this decision is made about what to pay and for what, by whom, and where even too. Is a job in this area going to pay more versus another job in another area?
Okay.
This kind
of thing. There's a few things that I'll just unpack it. The first thing you asked was about whether you can do 10 hours or 20 hours. The first thing to note about that is that the job guarantee fits jobs to people and not the other way around. So it guarantees that anyone who wants to work can have a job, whereas the private sector fits people to jobs. And that's a really important distinction. We don't want the government to employ people in the same way that the private sector employs people. The second thing is, the design of this. I'll just finish.
Everyone gets a.
I'll just finish answering the questions that you asked already. The full-time versus part-time issue is included in Bill Mitchell's design of a job guarantee. He sort of says, and there's many ways to design it, but he says that it's an hourly rate based on the fact that if you work full time, then you are above poverty, that you have a socially inclusive minimum wage, and that kind of thing. But that you can take on part-time employment, and it aids transition into private sector employment by freeing people up to do part-time or casual work for the private sector, in addition to their job guarantee job, in much the same way that you were saying is an advantage of the universal basic income. Now, the next part of your question was, by whom is it paid? This is federally funded. The reason that it's federally funded is because the government is free to create as much currency as it needs in order to close that spending gap between saving and consumption, and stabilize an unstable economy countercyclically.
Sorry,
Yep.
I didn't mean who was paid, because I know it's from the government. I mean, what I mean by whom is who's deciding that this job needs to be done in this area and this job needs to be done here and this is how much it pays. Like,
so the people who live in that area decide. The wage itself is defined as being above poverty level and socially inclusive, meaning that you can do more than just eat and pay rent and clothe yourselves. Differences in rent costs and cost of living by area would be dealt with using the same systems we currently do. You get rent assistance, you get varying family tax benefits, you get various things that come back as part of your income and support package. So we already have the welfare systems or the social security payment systems to deal with those types of variations, and that it would be basically measured against spending power to maintain a relative level of parity. It would never be perfect, but it would be pretty close to parity geographically. But the determination of what a minimum wage is done by social scientists and political scientists and economists. They have the poverty line. They know what cost of living is. It's just that they're mostly ignored.
Okay, and so another question I have is, so because this is a job guarantee, let's say I take a job and because I really want the $30,000 a year and I'm doing that job, but it's guaranteed. And so I'm like a huge slacker. I'm like, I don't care about doing this job, whatever. And so first of all, can I be fired for that because it's a guaranteed job? And second of all, if I am fired, can I then get another guaranteed job because it's guaranteed to me?
So the notion of being fired from a guaranteed job sort of I come back to the point about the jobs being fit to the people and not the other way around. Now, if someone doesn't want to do the job that is available to them, we need to have some pay. Now, economists differ on this. Mosler, Ray, and Phil Lorne all agree that we need to have a payment other than the job guarantee for people who just refuse to work. Bill Mitchell doesn't think that we need that, but then his definition of work kind of affords a much more flexible approach to that. So that basically the definition is that if you refuse to do anything, that there is still something that you will do within that spectrum of refusal. But that the idea is that really people who categorically refuse to do anything at all probably need our help. They probably need community engagement and mental health treatment, because really not wanting to be involved in your community at all in any capacity, I think could be considered a form of mental illness. And it's not to say that, because we're not creating bullshit jobs. This isn't a misery factory. This is going down to a local place with people who where kids can come along and get involved in improving things. If you don't want to get involved with that, then that's really antisocial, and it's probably has its roots somewhere else. So we need a way of dealing with people who are damaged and helping them come along and get engaged in their community. But I don't think that saying, "Oh, can I get fired and then get guaranteed another job," kind of still views it as the same as private sector employment. It doesn't really take into account the nature of having a job guarantee.
Okay, and
So that was. Are you going to give me a bonus question? That's where 9 minutes is up.
Okay.
I've got a couple more minutes if you want a bonus question.
Yeah. Just another question I'm curious about because I've looked at this here in the U.S. and I remember the Obama had a jobs program that he wanted to do that we ended up not going for.
Surprise, surprise.
And surprise. And the thing is that it was essentially like spending over $100,000 to provide someone, $20,000 or $3,000 or whatever, depending on what the job would have paid. So like, it cost like a lot more than just giving someone money. And so I'm just curious about like that. Like, what if like are there plans even that have been similar in Australia? And like, what are the costs that you've seen as far as like how much more does it cost to do these jobs and all the materials and infrastructure and everything that requires, and then comparing that even to just the results of just giving someone money?
Okay, so there are two things to unpack there. First of all, in terms of the cost, functional finance or modern monetary theory recognizes that any spending by the government closes the spending gap between consumption and saving. So that money is still being injected into the economy. It is not wasteful to spend money conducting this program. It is only a problem if the spending by the government competes with the private sector, if the spending by the government is inflationary or those types of things. And those can be resolved, but the nature of a job guarantee that it contracts spending as the private sector suffers or sees an upturn in activity and might be prone to inflationary forces, the government spending decreases because they're hiring out of this pool of ready labor. So the cost argument, you have to sort of go a little bit further into the economic theory to see why modern monetary theorists and functional finance people believe in full employment versus the universal basic income, which kind of talks about funding the program and costs and efficiency. Those aren't really considerations under a macroeconomic model that ascribes to functional finance. The second thing is that, in particular, youth unemployment in Australia, I don't know what the figures are anywhere else, but I think they're pretty high, especially between 15 to 19-year-olds. Now, these are kids who have left school to get a job, and they didn't want to stay at school. They are allowed to leave school at 15, and they're 64% unemployed. Their first experience of the workforce needs to be something where they're actually getting experience as workers. Otherwise, we're going to have people who can't do anything. And there's still a bunch of stuff that needs to get done. I know that there is some automation, technological unemployment, but the point at which we have no private purpose, meaning that there's nothing else to do, I think is probably thousands of years away. Even if it were 50 years away, that's 50 years that we still need to maintain some productivity. So if we look at the special case of young people, it is well worth the resources to create job opportunities for those kids where they're learning real skills and learning how to work and getting a good income and feeling good about working, because then they're going to grow up to be a really productive asset to the society.
Okay.
All right, that's about it. Scott, thanks very much. I think that was a really good, balanced session. I don't think that either of us got on a high horse about anything, which these things so often turn into. And thanks very much for coming on. And I'm going to put this on YouTube. I'll put it in the podcast, and I'll email you when it's up. And hopefully we can get the word out and start some discussion about this.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and it felt really short. It'd be nice to have more of a longer chat and even just have more of a discussion instead of like a regimented kind of thing. But it was still interesting, to just do this kind of format.
Yeah, well, I'd love to have you back on. Let's do a longer format next time, and we can just have a wide ranging discussion and really nut it out.
All right, yeah, sounds good. All right, great. Thanks for doing this.
Okay, thanks, Scott. I'll see you later.